Hi everyone, welcome back to our unit on Civics and Citizenship for Year 8. Today we are looking at common law. So the chapter that we're reading today is the chapter 25.3 Common Law, which is found on pages 490 and 491. So let's get started. The role of the judge is to interpret the statutory laws passed by Parliament and apply them to individual cases. New and unusual cases come up every day, and in some instances, statutory law is not clear about how a particular case should be dealt with. If an issue goes to court, a judge from a superior court must make a decision on how to resolve the issue in a just way. Now remember the word just, so it's used here, means fair, and it means like it's a fair way to deal with things. Think of the word justice. So when someone's looking for justice, they're looking for to make sure things are fair and correct. And just means the same thing. So it means fair. So they must make a decision on how to resolve the issue in a fair way, in a just way. This decision sets a precedent, which in this context means that any similar cases in the future should be dealt in the same way. So, last lesson we learned about statutory law, and that's Parliament-made laws. Remember, they go through the first reading, second reading, third reading in order to make a law. But common law works as the judges hear cases. They then have to interpret laws in order to make a decision. And if there isn't a law that is clear about what the just thing to do is, then the judge then makes that decision. And that sets a precedent. So then any other cases that come after that can go, they can say, well, in this case, the judge ruled this. So now you should rule this way because that is the common law. So over here now, while common law in many ways fills the gaps left by statutory laws, in some instances, the Parliament will pass law based on common law. This is known as codification. The Supreme Court in each state, the High Court of Australia, and the Federal Court are superior courts that can set a precedent. Once this precedent is set, all of the lower courts, such as the magistrates' courts, district courts, and family courts, must follow the precedent. So we're going to go into, in just a few seconds, the court hierarchy. And you are going to find these types of courts. So we've got the lower courts that I just mentioned, and then the superior courts or the higher courts is definitely the High Court of Australia, the Federal Court, and the Supreme Court of each state. So we'll have a look at those in just a second. First off, let's have a look at source one. The High Court of Australia is the nation's highest ranking court. Any decision it makes will set a precedent that all other courts must follow. So let's have a look on this page here. Now we have a flow chart on here that we're going to read through together. So let's have a look at what it is. Source 2. Australia has many different courts. Each court has different roles, responsibilities, and levels of authority. Now you can see that we go up this way in our court. So I'm going to read it that way. So first, the first level of court in Australia are the lower courts. See them here. So that is the Magistrates Court. That's the name of the court, the Magistrates Court. What they do is they hear minor civil, family law, and criminal cases. So for example, could be small property claims, drink driving, domestic violence. There is no jury. The magistrate hears the case and decides. And then it's also known as a summary proceeding. That's the lowest court. Then moving up in the hierarchy, we have the intermediate courts. So here we have the district and county courts. Now they hear more serious criminal cases and more complex civil cases. A judge hears and decides on the civil cases, and a judge and jury for criminal cases. But the judge declares the sentence or decides the sentence. Now, what they can do is they can hear appeals from the magistrate's court. I'm going to go into that in just a second. But basically, if you were tried, which means you go to a court, if you are tried for a case, whether it's criminal or civil, you can, after the decision has been made, you can then appeal this decision. Now, what an appeal means is that you are saying, for some reason, and we will go through those reasons later in the unit, for a particular reason, you just think that you have not been given the right punishment, or if you have not been given the right sentence. So what you can do is appeal. You can appeal the process and say, I don't think that I got a just or fair trial. But when an appeal happens, it has to go up to the higher court. So if someone that, say, is done for drink driving or domestic violence, if they want to appeal, they were tried in the magistrate's court. So they appeal, and their appeal is heard in the district and county courts. If someone wants an appeal from the district and county courts, their appeal will go up to the Supreme Court. If someone wants to appeal from the Supreme Court, it goes up to the High Court. So each one, the appeal has to go up a level, up to the one step higher court. So we just had a look at the district and county courts. Now, because this one feeds up here, I'm going to go straight up to this level. We will come back to these two courts down here in a moment. So after the intermediate courts, you can get to every state and territory has its highest court. So this is the highest court in each state and territory. So in Victoria, we have a Supreme Court. So the Supreme Courts, they hear the most serious criminal cases. So for example, murder, and the most complex civil cases. It is the highest court in each state and territory. And then it also, like I was explaining before, hears appeals from magistrates and county courts. So it has to go up the level. You will always appeal at a higher court than where your original trial was. And then finally, the state and territory courts. The highest one that we have in Australia is known as the High Court. So the highest court in the land. Now the High Court comprises of the Chief Justice and 6 other judges. So there's no jury, it's just the Chief Justice and 6 other judges. Cases may be heard by 3, 5, or all 7 judges. And if it's all 7 judges, it's known as a full bench. Then rulings are made by majority decision, and they are binding. So if you go up to the High Court, then that means that it's made by a majority decision. So however many judges are sitting on the bench, the majority that they vote for is a binding decision. You cannot appeal that decision. Now they have jurisdiction for all cases involving the federal government. They also hear appeals of Supreme and federal courts, and they are the only court that can interpret the Constitution. So these are the main courts that you will learn about over our unit, and that's usually that is the order that they go in. They go Magistrates Court, Districts and County Courts, Supreme Courts, and then High Court, and that's lowest to highest. But then we also have these other courts here. So we can see these are on the same level as the District and County Courts, so they are also intermediate courts. We have the Family Court of Australia. Now this court hears family law cases, so that might be divorce, custody of children, as in who will, after a divorce, who will look after those children, and property settlement. Then we've also got the Federal Circuit Court of Australia. So this was set up in 1999 to share the load of the family court and the federal court, which the federal court is up here. The jurisdiction covers family law, discrimination, migration, privacy, copyright, and more. And this, the Federal Circuit Court of Australia, holds hearings in all capital cities and some towns. Now these two feed into the Federal Court of Australia. And this is a Commonwealth court. So remember, the ones over at the Supreme Courts are state and territory courts, but these ones is the Commonwealth courts. And our Commonwealth Court is the Federal Court of Australia. Now this court hears cases under federal laws. So for example, industrial relations, bankruptcy, and taxation. It holds court sessions in all capital cities and some towns, has a chief justice and sometimes other judges, and it hears appeals from lower courts, such as these two down here. And then again, these Commonwealth courts feed into the High Court, which again, remember, is the highest court and has a binding decision made by majority. All right, so that's our courts in Australia. You might keep coming back to this flowchart over the unit if you need to remind yourself which court sees what cases and which courts feed into other courts. All right, well, now have a lovely rest of your day. I believe that we have some questions to answer after reading this part here. So enjoy the rest of your day and happy learning, guys.